Live broadcast. We have a special guest with us tonight. She's going to do a little house cleaning. First of all, I would like to thank the Lance Scurv show for producing this somewhere over in Africa, in Ghana, somewhere. On Lance, we really appreciate you. And again, you can find him at lancescurv.com. This is The Muslim Street, and my co-host, Hina Lotus, not feeling well, so she gets a break today. We have a special guest that we're going to bring in here in a second, Dr. Vibert White, who is author of Blacklisted. New book just came out. We'll also be featuring an article on the Muslim Street this upcoming week at www.themuslimstreet.com on his book, The Blacklisted. We're going to talk about that and its implications around present-day silencing of voices. Also, you can find us across all social media on X, Facebook. Join us there, like and share at The Muslim Street. And of course, on YouTube, where you can find this live show. And please like, share, subscribe to The Muslim Street. It helps us as we launch this new project. Now, the reason why we wanted to have Dr. White on, and I'll allow Dr. White to kind of introduce himself and his credentials to the audience here, is that we are in an age of silencing of voices, which one of the reasons why the Muslim Street podcast emerged, why one of the reasons the muslimstreet.com blog website emerged is to give space, a safe space to voices that will not be heard on the corporate media structure that we see, the CNNs, the MSNBCs, the Fox Newses of the world. They're not, and more and more what we find, Lance, if you look across the landscape of social media, particularly YouTube, and we're in a period of podcast explosion, right? You got podcasts all over the place. You got ex-athletes doing podcasts. You got people who want to be reporters doing podcasts. You got ideologues doing podcasts. They're everywhere, right? But what I'm finding more and more, what looks like an independent platform on these podcasts that we see on YouTube, are simply owned by the same people who own the CNNs and the MSNBCs of the world. I'll give you an example. Amanda Seales, an independent voice, sister who is an actress since she was a child. She co-hosted The Real. That's kind of like another version of The View with Whoopi Goldberg and all that. And she rose to her stardom there, working with Issa Rae on some projects over on Netflix and things of that nature. And then she had her own radio show at Radio 1, the Cafe U's. And I'm going to get to that, what happened to that in a minute, why these voices appear independent, but they're not. And this is kind of like the topic that we're going to talk about tonight. Here's one example. Amanda Seales, about 6-7 months ago, longer than that, actually, about 7 or 8 months ago, she was on the Shannon Sharp podcast called Club Shay Shay. And wow, a Hall of Fame tight end, that dude strapping about 240 pounds. Why he come out with a name, Shay Shay? I have no idea. Do you? But I ain't doing that. So he interviewed Amanda Seales for 2 hours. And I then called Amanda Seales' show. And oh, by the way, going back to that interview, he could not intellectually keep up with her. It was embarrassing. If you get a chance to go back and take a look at that podcast, Club Shay Shay, Shannon Sharp, and Amanda Seales, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. She holds a master's degree from Columbia University, Africana Studies. So he thought he was dealing with a actress, but he was dealing with an intellectual who was coming into a consciousness back in 2020. She was a big Democrat, and she thought she hit a wall. But in reference to the Club Shay Shay and Shannon Sharp, she exploded over this issue of the genocide that's going on in Palestine. It brought a new light and a new consciousness into her. And if you listen to her now, she has discarded the mainstream Democratic Party and their politics. She discarded any support of Kamala Harris and Joe Biden for their funding of the genocide. It comes off more like a revolutionary, right? So after she finished the show, 2 hours. This is in the height of her consciousness, because I'm listening to the Amanda Seales show that's coming on Radio 1, the Kathy Hughes' network, and Palestine this, Zionist that, down, down, down Israel, right? Now, not a word was that mentioned as I'm watching live on her interview with Shannon Sharp. So later that night, she does her own show, and I'm listening to that on the podcast, and she said that any reference to Palestine was deleted. Now, I said, whoa, wait a minute. I thought that Shannon Sharp, ex-athlete, just started a podcast and it blew up. Not. The white boys, they control that. Colin Cowherd, one of pretty popular sportscaster on Fox. He owns that platform, him and some other white boys. So they told him how it goes. He's just getting a paycheck, right? So as you look at some of these other shows, they're produced by the same essence of control that we see in the mainstream media. There's no independent voices on that. You can listen to Stephen A. yell at the top of his voice like, yo, Uncle Billy, all you want to. He ain't talking loud, like we say on the streets in Chicago, talking loud and ain't saying nothing.
Nothing, yes.
All right? Blah, 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 blah. Big deal. So this era of voices being smashed, silenced, we are here. So the basis of, as we bring Dr. White in to talk about his book, Blacklisted, the foundation of it, at least as we set the scene, will take us back to the 1950s. And those of you who don't read and don't understand history as a lesson for what will happen again, you should go read about voices who were silenced back in the 1950s. Senator Joe McCarthy, center stage, came up with this old Red Scare, communism, Trotskyism, anybody on Lenin, anybody on any of that. He went after Hollywood first. He went after educators. He went after leaders on both sides. Anyone that, and he literally blacklisted them. At his right hand were two individuals. One was Roy Cohn. That was his chief prosecutor, right? His chief counsel. Roy Cohn's assistant was Robert F. Kennedy. Now, this is important. And Dr. White will jump in here as soon as I set this up. We're in the 1950s. Robert F. Kennedy. Where does he leave the McCarthy era, which was there to smash any kind of independent voices, label them. This time they were labeling them not as they do today as anti-Semitism, so nobody won't listen to you, right? They labeled them as, communists, the Red Scare. Drove them from their jobs, drove them from their offices, drove them from their lanterns of lectures at major universities. And it was totally unfair, right? So let's follow the trail of Robert F. Kennedy. He sits as assistant chief counsel to Senator Joe McCarthy. Then he goes on and, attacks someone else, and then he goes from there. And his trajectory during the late 50s, the end of the Eisenhower administration, was what? It was to expose and attack the labor unions vis-a-vis the mafia, right? Now, his father, Joe Kennedy, a mobster, that's where he made his bones at before he went legitimate. He was a bootlegger back in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, had all the friends. The Meyer Lanskys, the ones who set up the mafia, he was right there with them. Him being an Irish, couldn't get in the La Cosa Nostra no more than Meyer Lansky could get in there with Bugsy Siegel because they were Jewish, right? But they had their own thing. It was called Murder Inc. More serious than the mafia, headed by Meyer Lansky, right? Now, Robert F. Kennedy sets up the phase of attacking the mafia and the labor unions, and then his brother gets elected in November of 1961 and becomes the president, right? Names him the Attorney General. Now he's the boss of who? He's the boss of J. Edgar Hoover, who is the director of the FBI. J. Edgar Hoover is in the midst of a serious launch into a program called the Counterintelligence Program. Also, one of the things that he used as a tool, J. Edgar Hoover, was blackmail. Right? He'll catch a prominent figure cheating on his wife, cheating on the husband, and he'll use that against him in order to silence. He used it against Dr. King, he attempted to use it against Dr. King. Bobby Kennedy okayed the surveillance Dr. King under the Counterintelligence Program. And essentially what happened is while they were surveilling Dr. King, they came up with some activities that he was carrying on with some blondes out in California. And Hoover, head of the FBI, calls Dr. King and Dr. White. He wants to silence him, right? He wants to blacklist him. So he says to Dr. King, either you get off of this communist stuff, you get off of this anti-war stuff, as he was getting ready to accept the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964. And he told him, if you don't get off of it, I'm going to send these tapes to your wife, Coretta Scott King. Dr. King called his bluff and said, you can do whatever you want. I'm not getting off of anything. Strong move. Well, J. Edgar Hoover did what he wanted. We know this because the telephones down in Dr. King's house in Georgia and down in Atlanta were bugged. By who? Robert F. Kennedy. The same Robert F. Kennedy who was assistant chief counsel to Joe McCarthy during the Red Scare. You see how this is? They're all on the same team.
Absolutely.
There's no Democrats or Republicans, right? They're on the same team. Now, listen. We know that J. Edgar Hoover had the FBI call, and his operatives call Coretta Scott King, because they also have her on tape calling Dr. King screaming at the top of her lungs. And this is the last thing I will say that will prove that I'm right when I'm making this assessment, right? Dr. King's holiday got approved as a national holiday with the exception of the state of Arizona in 1981. Who was president in 1981? It's Ronald Reagan, a very unlikely character, right? Who's going to pass the bill that calls for a national holiday for Dr. King. Inside of that bill was a stipulation and a clause that the FBI tapes that J. Edgar Hoover, back in the 1960s, would stay sealed until somewhere around 2050 or something like that. Meaning that everybody who was alive to see Dr. King physically, that heard about him first generation, will be dead and gone. Yeah, this is the truth. So those tapes are sealed by who? Ronald Reagan. Ronald who? Ronald Reagan, the one who was on the who was taped during the early 1970s with President Nixon when he was president, calling Africans monkeys, calling African heads of states monkeys. This racist Ronald Reagan, the one who came out of Central Illinois and who went to Eureka College.
Your school.
Unfortunately, my school. I don't want to say I got ran out of anywhere because of racism, but when I left there, I was starting quarterback there as a freshman. All white offense, right? Blocking for me. I made a couple mistakes, man. I had the offensive line and everything else at my dorm room that night dressed in sheets. Listen, when I left there, I said I would never come back down there. The coach, they had a new coach coming in next year, and this is personal. And he said, he called me every other day. Oh, yeah, we're going to renew your scholarship. Oh, yeah, we really want you to come back. Oh, you're going to be starting quarterback. And I told him, you better call someone else because I'll never step foot on that campus. That was 1978. Today, I've never been down there. They even send me emails, alumni emails. I'm really not an alumni. I'll stay down there 1 year and I'm never coming back. Anyway, I just want to have some fun with setting up this silencing period that started in the 1950s, the blackmail in the 1960s on the counterintelligence program of the FBI with J. Edgar Hoover, which he, along with the United States government, defeated the Black liberation struggle by using not only blackmail, but also assassination, also the infiltration of Black organizations in order to disrupt our movement. This is all stated in the counterintelligence program papers that were released in 1979 under the Freedom of Information Act. Go back to the library, people, and do some reading. Dr. White, I'd like to bring you in with that as a basis. Blacklisted. What does your book tell us?
Well, thank you, Brother Malik, for the fine introduction and foundation that you laid for the audience and myself. Blacklisted, The Price for Speaking Truth. It's a major manuscript that focuses on what I call the new McCarthy era that we live in today, whereby a person can be sidelined and polarized and isolated if they do not speak the narrative that what I call the political elite has set up for us to speak. And the political elite are not Republicans, they're not Democrats, they're, like you stated earlier, just one party, all right, just one team. And they have a narrative that focuses on American domination, American handling domestic issues in reference to minorities like African Americans. They set up a framework of how the working class people should think and how they should function. And when a person begins to see that there are changes or that there are contradictions, the political elite would go all out to destroy them. We saw this taking place with Julian Assange, Edward Snowden, Louis Farrakhan, even to an extent, Donald Trump, but he was not aligned with them because, you remember, he comes in as a disruptor. Very interesting stuff. Now, the question is where did it come from? Like you stated earlier, it comes back from the 1950s, late 1940s and 1950s. This is when we begin to see the establishment finding a way, finding a mechanism to silence voices. How is this and how did it develop? And we're going to juxtapose that with what took place in the 1940s and 50s to the 20s, to the 20 teens and 20s, 25, where we are today. What took place? All right. In 1947, I believe, 49, you have the Russians are being able to crack the atomic bomb. They develop atomic energy and they created the first bomb. Now, the question that came up is that the Americans started saying, where did they get this idea from? Where did they get this far from. How did they do it? They're not as smart as us. So therefore, they started saying that there are communists within the government trying to destroy and take down the government. They listed several people. Then they found and they focused on Ethel and Julius Rosenberg, the first American couple who was ever executed. All right, executed on a rumor primarily. They did not find enough evidence, but they said that, well, they knew something about it. They worked in the industry. They must have got it from them. Now, how does this relate to the African American story and other minorities? Well, from the 1930s and 1940s, there was always afraid of African Americans being part of what you call a fifth column. A fifth column is an organization or an ideology that comes up in a disenchanted group to overthrow the country. So who did they look as being members of this fifth column? Well, it goes way back. They thought Elijah Muhammad was a member of this column, fifth column. They thought that W.E.B. Du Bois was a member. Charles Houston, the professor who taught Thurgood Marshall, they thought he was. The fact, and by them thinking that these people were a fifth column, they automatically stated that they were communists, which now meant that they should be disrupted, they should be isolated, they should be put in jail, and the last extent, they should be killed. And they went all out after this. One of the people who was most highlighted as being a communist, as you know, was Paul Robeson. Like you, Malik, he was brilliant. He was an athlete, world traveler like you, taught himself five or six different languages, but he never did fit the pattern that they wanted. Even though he was a great actor, and even though he was a great singer, he used his platform to highlight the contradictions and the hypocrisy of the United States. So they went all out. So now, by the 1950s, late 40s, early 50s, they started having something called Un-American Activity Committees, forms that was in Congress. Now, you said something very interesting. You said about John F. Kennedy. Remember, John F. Kennedy, he was a senator, and he came to fight against communism. And guess what? There was another young senator just like him, and that was Richard Nixon.
Mm-hmm.
He came in to fight communism. Then you had the big godfather who supported both of them, who hated communism, and that was J. Edgar Hoover.
Mm-hmm.
You see, then along with that, you have the president, Eisenhower. He was anti-communist. That's why he appointed Earl Warren. Now, if you're Black, you should know something about Chief Justice Earl Warren, because he was the one who presided over Brown versus Board of Education,
Mm-hmm.
stated that segregation within educational systems were wrong. The case was Brown versus Board of Education, Topeka, Kansas. So you have this group, 5 of them, fighting against communists, and they were looking for them. Now here comes Joe McCarthy. Now Joe McCarthy is very interesting. He's from Wisconsin, right? Now what makes it interesting is that Wisconsin, as well as Minnesota, as well as the northern part of Illinois, was known to have communists in the 1920s and 30s. And communism, put it in your notes, family, and socialism was not a dirty word.
Right.
They saw it as part of the American political system. In fact, in Wisconsin even, the Socialist Party was the strongest party for a number of years until they tried to undermine it. So now you have all these people saying that they must fight against communism. So therefore, they begin to look for scapegoats. They disrupt people's homes, their jobs, put them in jail, lose their homes, lose their mortgages, and all of this. This lays the foundation that says, first of all, America has a bureaucracy that they will try to defend. And that if anyone goes against this bureaucracy, which is their narrative, they will destroy. Going to Martin Luther King, remember, they stated that later on that his speechwriter was a communist.
Mhm.
Said that, in fact, his thesis, his dissertation was had communist leanings. You know, he never had nothing like that. They said Malcolm was a communist.
Yes.
Everybody is a communist. Well, this brings us to now the 21st century. Yes, go ahead.
Dr. White, before we go to the 21st century, let me back up a few steps. You mentioned something very important, and I want to get context to it for the audience. The Fifth Estate and the paranoia of the United States government as it begins to transition from newly getting into the game of after World War II into imperialism, right?
Right.
The Fifth Estate, and you mentioned the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. I want you to tie. You also mentioned the subcommittee, the House on Un-American Activities. Okay.
Yes.
Now I want to talk about these two pieces. In the 1940s, Elijah Muhammad is jailed,
right,
because of this fifth column idea and his celebratory discussions and public positions on Japan.
Right.
Right. They used some other rules that he didn't send the kids to school, and that's why we're putting you in jail for that kind of thing. He was up in Milan, Michigan, or whatever. But that was the issue, right? Now let's fast forward and let's fast forward to what you mentioned about the subcommittee of House on Un-American Activities. In 1959, and it is my contention that Elijah Muhammad is built in 1959. The Nation of Islam has a serious organization, with thousands and thousands of members, right?
Right.
And he doesn't want to jeopardize this by going back to jail. He experienced that in the 1940s on a ruse, on a lie, and he just want to go back there, right? So in 1959, the House on Un-American Activities called Elijah Muhammad separate, Malcolm X separate, and then a character by the name of John Ali, who was the National Secretary of the Nation of Islam, and those who understand the construct of the Nation of Islam, that's a very high position, right?
Right.
He's in Chicago at the headquarters. Prior to that, admittedly, it comes out in the book, not prior to that, a few years later, The Fire Next Time, that John Ali, was an FBI asset. Absolutely. That he, in fact, had interviewed for a job with the head of the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover, and this would be 1955, 1956, 57. Prior to the House on Un-American Activity calling Malcolm, calling Elijah Muhammad, and calling John Ali to Washington to testify. Now, here's something very interesting I want you to discuss. Malcolm shows up. He does his thing, right? Elijah Muhammad is cautious because he doesn't want a repeat of the setup that went on in the 1940s that sent him to jail. Mm-hmm. Right? Now, John Ali is called, but guess what? He shows up. Let me say this. Everyone knows that the standard uniform, daily uniform of men in the Nation of Islam, dark suit, white shirt, dark tie, very conservative, right?
Right.
John Ali shows up to take his turn to testify in 1959 at the House on Un-American Activities in a white shirt, white tie, white suit, white socks, white hat, white shoes. The reason why we find this worth mentioning, Dr. White, was he sending a signal to the inside of the FBI that I'm on your team?
Absolutely. The thing that separates Elijah Muhammad and Malcolm and John Ali, Malcolm and Elijah Muhammad had no punk in them. All right. They weren't doing this for money. But Ali, he had a John Ali. He was a national secretary. He liked the power. He liked the money, and so he would do a lot of things. Even later on with Muhammad Ali, so he would do a lot of things for the money, and this is not unusual because the FBI, if they can't do anything well at all, they know how to infiltrate groups and they know how to put people against each other. I mean, if we juxtapose this with Al Sharpton. Now, remember, Al Sharpton in the 1980s became an informant for the FBI. Now, at that same time, he was hanging around with Louis Farrakhan. He was hanging around with Khalid Muhammad. He was hanging around with Ben Shavers, anybody who he thought had some political leverage within the Black community. And he is willing to sell his soul for a couple of for some dollars for prestige and admiration from the enemy. Go ahead.
So I want to close this loop in the context of late 1959, and then I want to jump on something that you just talked about with Reverend Al Sharpton in the 80s and the FBI. Right now,
yes.
One thing that we have to maintain: in 1964, Malcolm leaves the Nation of Islam, and one of the things that he said, and he said it very loudly, that we had the best organization. Speaking of the Nation of Islam, which he was, the national spokesperson to the Honorable Muhammad #2 in charge. So we had the best organization until those
Negroes
in Chicago messed it up. Mm-hmm. The main one that Malcolm identified as his biggest enemy inside the nation was the National Secretary, John Ali. We also can track John Ali a week before Malcolm's assassination in Harlem, speaking to the Fruit of Islam in New York under the guidance of Captain Joseph. Elijah Muhammad Jr. was also there, where he's making threats on the life of Malcolm, John Ali, to the extent that they want this taken care of. Now, the point I want to make right here is that John Ali is in his mid-90s, still alive in Chicago. Mm-hmm. Did you know that?
Yes, I did know.
Yeah. So when the FBI under this, and this is part of the blacklisting that you're talking about,
right?
Infiltrate organizations and throw them off track, and they start controlling the narrative, especially that high up in the organization. National secretary who's controlling the money flow of the organization, making business recommendations to the leader of the organization. This is huge stuff. And by the way, it's top man of affairs is Malcolm X, and you chase him out of the Nation of Islam. Mm-hmm. This is very huge. So I will close the loop on Reverend Al Sharpton. You mentioned that Reverend Al Sharpton, working for the FBI in the 1980s, there was a group called the Black Liberation Army.
Right.
It's like Duro Ben Wahad, Assata Shakur goes to jail, right? On this police thing in New Jersey. People like Sunday Adekole. The assassinations are taking place in New York City. Mm-hmm. Do you know who was the head counsel for Assata Shakur? It was Chokwe Lumumba, who, along with Omari Obadeli in the early 1970s, started a group called the Republic of New Africa, right?
Yes.
He, and I want you to follow this because I couldn't believe it when
I got you, yeah.
So Reverend Al Sharpton informs the FBI in an attempt to set up Assata Shakur. Mm-hmm. Of course, she flees and she's under the guidance of the Cuban Revolution, and she cannot be touched. Right now, and I'll come back to how this stuff is such a big web. When I finish with this Al Sharpton story, because I'm not going to stop there. Al Sharpton knows that Chokwe Lumumba who I introduced in 2014 at a conference in Jackson, Mississippi on reparations. And he later became the mayor of Jackson, Mississippi. Al Sharpton does a show on MSNBC called Politics Nation, where he celebrates all of the black politicians and around the country. But when Chokwe dies, suddenly, not a mention of his word, not a mention a word about Chokwe Lumumba, his legacy or anything that night on his show. White boy, his last name Hughes, whatever. He did a segment on Chokwe. Al Sharpton came before him, didn't mention one word. What a hypocrite, right? Now I'm gonna close the loop on when I talk about they just don't stop. I mean, it's just like this web, right?
Right.
All of it is part of the silencing thing. All of it's part of the blacklisting, right? Now, Reverend Al Sharpton, you talked about his coming around Jesse Jackson. He lands there, but before that, he's found trying to float around and show up with Minister Louis Farrakhan in the mid to late 80s, right? He throws around Tawana Brawley and all that, so that's his stuff. Right? Now, and I want you to follow this because it doesn't stop, and I watched this and I studied this. In the second half of the Obama administration, this will place us when Obama is lame duck in 2016, the fall of 2016. One of his last international trips is where? He goes to Havana, Cuba, gives a speech right in Revolutionary Square with the backdrop of Che Guevara. I was cracking up. Now, who had more access than any other black leader during the 8 years of the Obama administration? You know who it was?
Who was it?
Al Sharpton. Over 450 times he's in and out of the White House. Not only that, in 2011, February of 2011, Barack Obama and Al Sharpton supported Hillary Clinton in 2008 against him. In 2011, in February 2011, Al Sharpton receives a check from the Obama administration of $25 million. I have it all documented, and nobody won't talk about it. $25 million. And then his conference, to further proof, his conference at the National Action Network, which took place April, a month later, has the who's who of the White House speaking at workshops. President Clinton is there. Hillary Clinton is there. Michelle Obama is there. Desiree Rogers, who was the head of protocol, is there. I mean, the whole slew of the Obama administration is there giving workshops. And then President Clinton gives President Obama gives the keynote address. Now, if anybody got what I said in the listening audience, go back a year before in 2010 and look at his conference, the National Action Network National Convention in Harlem, New York, and see who was there. You know who his keynote was? It was a high school principal out of Ohio. Game over. I know what I'm talking about. $25 million bought that access. He went from getting his Cadillac repossessed in 2010, and his organization was flat broke, into receiving a check for $25 million. May of that year, a month and a half later, MSNBC is so impressed by his access to the White House, they give him Politics Nation and a big salary, and he's been there ever since, right? So we want to talk about silencing, we want to talk about blacklisting. You think Al Sharpton is going to have you on his show? No. You think he's going to have Malik Aziz on his show? Hell no. He wouldn't even mention Chokwe Lumumba. That's where I stop.
And you're absolutely right, because people like Al Sharpton, like in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, become gatekeepers because they push the narrative that the government wants. Now, what's not only hypocritical about it, but racist, they argue and maintain that really that it must take the communists or somebody else to have to put that into the minds of the African American people that there's a problem. Not looking at the fact that African American people have lived in this society for 400 years, they see the hypocrisy, and they're able to draw their own conclusions. You see, then on top of that, they know what they're doing, because many African Americans are Christians, and they have this anti-communist thing. So therefore, in the 1940s and 50s, put that anti-communist stamp on them. It means that they're against God, they're against religion, and they are against, quote, American values. even though American values do not extend to the African American people at this particular time in American history. Now, now we go to the 19 to the 21st century. What's happening in the 21st century? First of all, I started working with the Assange and Edward Snowden. These young men began to challenge the hypocrisy. They began to uncover a number of things that the United States was doing wrong. That is, they found that the United States were killing innocent people in overseas and covering up. They were executing people. They were torturing people. They were spying on American people themselves. They were creating a dual network. That is, there's one American society and there's another American society. And this was not just on black and white. This was on power and people who have no power. That's very interesting. So therefore, when Snowden and Edward started to uncover these things, what did they do? On both the cases, they tried to assassinate both individuals. All right? They tried to isolate both individuals. Then they even tried to say that they both individuals were treasonous, even though one of them, Assange, was not even an American citizen. You see? So they did all of these things. Now, let's take it to the African American story. At the same time, you had a number of African Americans who also began to speak out on issues, and they were sidelined, especially the members of the Black political nationalist movement. In fact, you see between 2010 to about 2020, at least 20 of these people were placed in jails quietly. Some of them they had their homes destroyed, they lost their income, and it was done very, very quietly. Now, by being quiet at the same time, they put money into the hands of what I call gatekeepers so they can push a storyline. And what is the storyline for the African American community in reference to American society? Pushing the ideology of civil rights, pushing the ideology we must defend democracy, push an ideology that on no account should we be violent. Now there's a group, when I talk about violence, that's part of this. This group is in the Department of Justice. It is called the Peacekeepers. Have you ever heard of them?
Yes.
Now the Peacekeepers, very interesting. They are, again, hired Black people and some whites and Jews to go into the Black community when they think that there's going to be a question mark. That is a question that Blacks are beginning to question what is taking place. So they pushed this one thing. One, they go to the ministers and they begin to say, listen, Minister John, listen, Minister Frank, listen, Minister Picklewick, don't say nothing. If anything, we just want you to talk about there's going to be no violence, and we'll give you a grant. Then they bring in Al Sharpton again. Case in point, when you had the case in Sanford, Florida, I forgot the name of the Zimmerman case. All right, they had the peacekeepers go in first, quiet the people, scare people, saying that if Blacks congregate and may be violent, scare people. All right. Then they had Al Sharpton come in. He gives a pseudo revolutionary talk. Sounds loud, sounds good, trying to be like a Martin Luther King. Then he says that we all have to vote and be quiet and work through the system. You see? Now, again, if you speak outside of this, you are sidelined and you're looked upon as being a revolutionary, as being a threat to the system. And so the question comes in, Malik, do we live in a democracy? And the answer is no. Do we live in a place of free speech? Answer is no. We've seen, like on our own broadcast throughout the country, a number of people who had independent news and information like you was shut down
Yeah.
before the Tesla guy took over. What's his name? Elon Musk.
Elon Musk.
Yes, yes. Go ahead. You had a question?
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to just take a minute here to advise that we're on the Muslim Street. You can find us at www.themuslimstreet.com. Also on across all social media platforms, including YouTube at The Muslim Street. Please like, subscribe, and share so that we can continue to bring you this great content. Where I want to go from here, Dr. White, and is to how Americanism, in the context of Blacklisting, your book, controls the narrative not only nationally, domestically, right, on issues in the Black community and others, but also internationally. And here's what I want you to address. We're seeing something that's kind of playing out right now that played out in the late 70s, early 80s. There was a congressman by the name of Charlie Wilson. Charlie Wilson out of Texas, and he set over a operation under the Carter and then Reagan administration called Operation Cyclone. It was a CIA operation. It was covert, and they were funneling weapons to the Afghans to fight that war down in 1979 against the Soviets, right? The Mujahideen, right? Now, Charlie Wilson's war, which became to be known, he was first approached to get involved with this, at least from that narrative, by these fundamental Christians, Christian nationalists, who are now the same Christian nationalists who have, I've heard the number, somewhere 60 to 65% of them, by their own admission, are Zionists, right? They are supporting the same element, are supporting this whole issue of trying to drive Donald Trump. They can control Biden. I mean, because he came out and I'm a Zionist. So they had him at hello, right? So the Christian fundamentalists in this country, which way outnumbers the total Jewish population in this country, and even out of the total Jewish population, not 100% of them are Zionists, right? We know of people like Attorney Stanley Cohen. We know about Dr. Norman Finkelstein, whose mother and father were victims of the Holocaust. We know about Dr. Amy Gutman, Democracy Now!, whose grandfather was a rabbi who come on the other side in support of the Palestinians, right? So it's not a Jewish thing, it's a thing about Zionism. So here you have an overwhelming support, the Mike Huckabees of the world, right?
Yes.
So one of them, not a Christian Zionist, but they were driving this issue with Netanyahu, and Trump just rejected it. He had his one of his national security advisors, Waltz, had a back channel to Netanyahu trying to drive a war into Iran. Once Trump heard that he had a back channel in his own White House, what did he do? He got rid of Waltz, just left the Middle East, didn't even say hi to Netanyahu, and came on his own turf, and the whole thing is disrupted. That whole relationship is disrupted because the Christian Zionists are in a flux right now over this Trump thing. Right. Marjorie Taylor Greene came out on the side of the right side of the issue with silencing people, blacklisting people just for criticizing Israel could be 20 years in jail. She's MAGA, and she said, no, I'm not with that. And she didn't get any pushback from Trump on that, but she got pushback from the Christian nationalists and the fundamentalists inside of the MAGA movement. There's a disruption going on. I just want you to talk about how the blacklist is international.
Let's look at Trump, first of all. When Trump was campaigning the first time, he told the Jewish business community that we're the same. We both like money, and we both have a lot of money, and I don't need your money. That pisses them off. He began to get pushback when he was in Congress, as the president, because over 60% of congressional leaders and senatorial leaders in the United States have joint citizenship with Israel.
Yeah.
And one of the things that they need to do is to list the people who have this joint citizenship, because it has a direct effect on national security.
Mm-hmm.
They should be labeled as agents, to be honest with you.
Yeah, Biden's Secretary of State was Netanyahu's personal lawyer. I mean, nobody even talks about this.
That's right, and even some black ones like Jeffries.
Yes.
All right, he has that joint citizenship too. So a whole host of them. So he started to feel the pressure. He tried to be independent. So what did he try to do? Well, one of the first actions in reference to Israel, he names Jerusalem as the capital, remember?
Yeah.
As an appeasement. But you cannot appease these people, all right? Because they want blood, they want more. So when he was out of office, they did everything they can, again, using black faces as they shield to go after Trump. He was blacklisted in everything. If it meant even just showing up for an event that dealt with other presidents, he was not invited.
Mm-hmm.
The press was against him. They tried to go after his money. They tried to go after his family. They tried to go after his character. They were constantly attacking him. So now he's back in office, right? Now, he still feels the attack because even within his own administration, you have a number of people who are influenced by the Zionists who want war. Marco Rubio is one of them. I mean, he's a heavy one, all right? And several others. So he has a lot of infighting within that group. Now, remember the tape thing that was just done about 3 or 4 months ago that leaked out about information in which they was going to do in the Middle East.
Yeah.
That came out through an informant who was aligned with the Zionist organization. All of that. So Trump is in a tough situation because the Zionists, they want war. They want to extend their influence. In fact, they're already taken over Gaza completely. All right. They still attacking Syria, even though Assad has left. Assad has left, and they still want to expand, and they still want a war with Iran, knowing that they can't. They're not going to beat Iran. I don't care what you say. They will not beat Iran in a head-to-head war unless they use nuclear, and that's something else that brings in that's something else that can cause some problems. So therefore, they want the United States. So Trump, trying to be independent now, he says, no, I'm not even going to deal with Netanyahu on this. But listen, Malik, that's only superficial, which really means that really means the Jews still control Trump. How is that, the Zionists? Well, if he was really against Netanyahu and that, he could easily say, one, we're not sending you any more weapons.
Right.
You're completely off. Two, he was saying in one sentence, genocide. That's what's taking place. But he hasn't said that. And thirdly, he can write an executive order that forces all senators and congressmen and leaders throughout the country to announce or to list their citizenship with Israel. All the ones who have done this, they have to announce it to the public. He could do those 3 things, which tells me, since he didn't, that he just has a little spat with Netanyahu, boyfriend, girlfriend spat.
Yeah.
But nothing is really going to take place.
Yeah, that's what I said. I said, it was perceived that he had been married to Netanyahu and Donald Trump had a marriage, but I said, no, they were only dating.
That's right, absolutely.
Yeah. I go back to Dr. White. You mentioned, and we're here on the Muslim Street. We kind of wrap up here in the next 5 minutes. You can find us at www.themuslimstreet.com. Like and share us across all social media platforms. YouTube, subscribe. Dr. White, you mentioned Hakeem Jeffries, right?
Yes.
A former minority leader in the House. He You mentioned that he has dual citizenship in Israel.
Absolutely, he does, and a few others. But I found this out about a year ago, and I kept on asking, why is he so concerned about Israel?
Hmm.
And he has traveled to Israel more than any member of the Congressional Black Caucus in its history.
Hmm.
All right, and he's taken.
I think he's taken up to the north of $750,000 this year alone.
It's much more than that. He takes so much. He takes some from the APAC. Then they have a back door that filters money to him. He is set for life. His family, his children's children are set for life.
Wow.
With the amount of money that he has taken. At the same time, he is working with the Zionists in Ukraine. Because remember, interesting thing, there is a relationship between Zelensky and Netanyahu.
Yeah.
With weapons.
Yeah.
They're tight. Just like back in the day, it was Israel and South Africa, apartheid South Africa.
Exactly. And we must note that Zelensky is a Zionist, period.
Absolutely. He is a Zionist. And not only that, he is a racist against Black people. I mean, I would never forget nor forgive him that when the war broke out, Africans were trying to get out of Ukraine, and he was pushing them in the in the back of the train.
Yeah,
he was ignoring them. He wasn't giving them any way out. He's basically saying, "You can die. We don't care nothing about you."
Yeah. He's a grifter. That dude used to show up here. Zelensky would show up in the United States in Washington, D.C. during the Biden administration like clockwork, once a quarter to pick up his check.
So the question with Blacklisted, with Trump, how far will he go so that he will not be blacklisted again? Now, blacklisted in his element is not just the concept of being isolated, but utilizing the mechanism of the government to entrap him. All right? And remember, the government can do this. Remember, Edgar Hoover was more powerful than any president.
Yeah. On this point, how long do you predict before the Democrats bring to Congress, particularly the House first, articles of impeachment on Donald Trump?
It's being done
in this context of blacklisting.
I think that's going to be done within the next 3 months.
Mm-hmm. You heard it first.
I mean, they tried it, and it wasn't working. So many of the senators started to pull back and say, it's not time. But they're working it now because right now, remember the Democrats, which is nothing but a shield.
Yes.
All right. They just want to entrap the African American into their agenda, into their narrative. They are a dying party. They have no ideology, and they're just trying to hold on to anything.
Yes.
You see, and this now leaves the option for us, people who are African American and other people of the global South, to really develop a third party.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. As we close out, Dr. White, it's been a pleasure. We're up on about the last 120 seconds. Where can the audience find your book? Some other works that you're doing? Can you list your information?
Yes. You can find my book on any of the platforms, Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, or any of them. If you want an autographed copy of my book, you can always call 321-320-5373. 321-320-5373. Or you can write to Post Office Box 148, Goldenrod, Florida. Post Office Box 148, Goldenrod, Florida, 32733. You contact us there. We will be glad to send you one of our books. You will get an autographed copy. You just send in a check or money order for $45 to handle shipping as well as the cost of the project.
Awesome. Thank you. And you're welcome, Dr. White. And also, we'll be publishing on the Muslim Street an article on the book, a review on Blacklisted this week coming up, and you can find that at www.richness, www.themuslimstreet.com. Look out for next week. Our co-host, Hina Lotus will be back. This is Malik Aziz for Hina, along with the rest of the staff at the Muslim Street. We also want to thank Lance Scurv, the Wolf in Africa, for producing this show. You can find him at the lancescurv.com. Thank you, and we will see you guys same time, same station next week. That's every Sunday night, 7:30 Eastern Daylight Time.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
Hello, are we off?